Now let us see the next LOS, the LOS 55.j, and for you this is the last LOS of this reading, so you should be happy. Okay, now what they are saying is you have to define the LIBOR, okay, and explain the importance of LIBOR to funded investors, okay, who borrow in the short term. Okay, so we have seen a LIBOR earlier in the readings. Okay, so LIBOR is London Interbank Offer Rate. Okay, so this is the rate at which the banks lend to each other. Okay, now we need to understand who is a funded investor. Okay, please note that a funded investor is an investor, he will borrow. Okay, he borrows money, and this borrowed money he invests in bonds. Okay, now all these funded investors, what they want is their investment return. So the investment return should be greater than the rate at which they have borrowed. So their investment return should be greater than the borrowed return. Okay, now note that the LIBOR has become the de facto floating rate interest standard in the world because it is determined by the market. So the LIBOR is market determined. Okay, it is not influenced by the policy of treasury. Okay, please note that we have said that some treasury rates are being determined by the Federal Reserve policy tools. Okay, open market operation, discount rate, okay, reserve requirement. So the LIBOR rate is a market determined rate. It is not same as the treasury yield curve, okay, or the same as the treasury yield. Okay, in fact LIBOR is riskier. Okay, treasury is risk free. Okay, so LIBOR is riskier, treasury is risk free, and we will say that the LIBOR rate, because the LIBOR rate is the rate at which two banks they lend to each other. Okay, so it is like roughly the average risk of the banks, right? So you can say that, okay, roughly A risk would be there, credit quality A, credit rating A, right? So it's a risky bond, risky rate. Okay, now what happens is these funded investors, when they want to borrow, the de facto rate is LIBOR and their funding would be pegged as per LIBOR. So a funded investor may be charged, let's say, LIBOR plus 2%. Some investors may be charged LIBOR plus 0.5%, depending on how much riskier the investor is. This investor is more riskier as compared to this investor, so he is being charged a higher rate. Some investors may be like maybe AAA rated bond companies, so there the return may be, let's say, they may have to pay a lower rate, so LIBOR minus can come. So you can have LIBOR plus, LIBOR minus, all of this. So we have seen earlier it is the LIBOR plus minus margin, right? So a funded investor, he would get the money at the floating rate, current floating rate, which is the LIBOR rate, and he will determine which is whether he should borrow or not, depending on whether his investment return is greater than the rate at which he is borrowing. Let us see. Okay, so the LIBOR is the benchmark rate for the short term lending and the floating rate debt. This is reported by the BBA, British Bankers Association. It is daily and on many currencies, and daily means like for different maturities also they say 7 days, 14 days, like that. Note that it's not a risk free rate, some default risk is there. Okay, LIBOR is not impacted by the treasury rate. Okay, and it is important in the institutional market. Funded investor who borrows fund, okay, the borrowing rate is decided by the LIBOR rate. Higher the LIBOR, there is more cost of fund, and funded investor, he would make profit only if he earns rate greater than the LIBOR rate, right? So this completes your reading number 55, right? Let's just do a recap on what all we have studied. We have studied a lot of things. Okay, first thing that we have studied is, okay,